It was the kind of night that felt older than time itself. Clouds drifted lazily across the moon, silver and heavy, hiding its light behind a thin veil. The village lay still. Windows glimmered faintly with candlelight, and the cobblestones were slick with evening rain. Every street was empty, and every rooftop seemed to exhale quietly, as though the houses themselves had fallen into a gentle sleep. Even the stray cats were tucked beneath porches, tails curled, ears twitching in dreams. I walked without hurry. The rain whispered against my coat, soft and constant, like a lullaby just beyond hearing. My boots nudged the gravel, making small, deliberate sounds. Each crunch echoed longer than it should. People in the village spoke of a house that appeared only at midnight. They said it did not exist in daylight, that it arrived with the 12th toll of the church bell, carried on the shadow of the hour. Some said it remembered what you had forgotten. Some said it offered back small things you didn't even know you'd lost. I had heard these tales as a child, stories whispered while rain tapped against the window pane, names of villagers long gone, memories half forgotten, all claiming to have glimpsed the house, yet none ever staying inside. Tonight I wanted more than tales. Tonight I wanted to see it myself. The streets were quiet, save for the soft patter of rain. The baker's shop had long since closed. The fountain in the square murmured alone, reflecting silver in the lantern light. Every step I took seemed measured by the night itself, deliberate, patient, waiting for the right moment. Ahead, the church tower rose like a sentinel. Its clock face was pale, like a watchful eye. When the minute hand met the hour, the bell began. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And as the final echo of the bell lingered in the night air, I saw it. A narrow lane where no lane had been before. A gate where none existed in daylight. And beyond the gate, a roof line, sharp and certain, rising from the mist as if it had always been waiting. It was a house unafraid of being itself. I took a step closer. The gravel crunched beneath my boots. Each sound was unnaturally loud in the quiet. The air smelled faintly of wet wood, candle wax, and something floral. Roses, though none grew nearby. The gate's iron bars glistened with rain. The lanterns atop the posts swayed gently, casting elongated shadows. I reached the latch. The gate opened with a sigh, a sound that was not warning, not complaint, but a breath of invitation. I stepped inside. The path beneath my feet was smooth stone, reflecting the dim glow of lanterns. The hedges on either side were perfect, immobile, yet alive somehow, like statues breathing quietly. Ahead stood the house, its windows tall and narrow, like watchful eyes. The door was simple, yet somehow regal, the wood dark and polished. I rested my palm against it, warm, alive. It felt as though the house itself was breathing through the grain, and perhaps it was. I lifted the handle. It moved easily, yielding as if expecting me. I stepped across the threshold. The door closed softly behind me. Not a slam, not a click, just closed. Inside, the air was different, warm, familiar, yet tinged with something impossible to name. A piano somewhere in the distance tested a single key, then another, then a third, faint and careful. I was inside the house that only appeared at midnight.
The gate was not grand, but it held a quiet dignity. Iron bars glistened with rain, and the posts were capped with small lanterns that cast a soft golden glow across the stone path. The flame inside each lantern swayed gently, as if breathing. Up close, the metal felt cool beneath my fingers, smooth from years of rain and touch. I pressed the latch, and it opened with a low, soft sound, like the house itself exhaling in welcome. The path beyond was paved with stones, slick and shining, flanked by hedges that were perfectly trimmed, yet seemed almost alive, as if they had been waiting to guide me. The air smelled faintly of wet wood, candle wax, and a subtle floral scent, roses, though no roses grew. Each step I took on the stone path felt deliberate, measured, as if the ground itself had a rhythm meant for me. I looked up at the house. Its roof rose sharply into the night, and the windows were tall and narrow, like watchful eyes. The door was dark and polished, simple yet commanding. The house felt alive, aware of my presence, patient and quiet. I rested my hand on the door. Warmth radiated through the wood, a living presence that invited me inside. I lifted the handle, and it moved easily, yielding as if it had been waiting for this very moment. I stepped across the threshold. The door closed behind me with a quiet certainty. The air inside was different, warmer, and carried the subtle scent of old wood and wax. Somewhere in the distance, a piano played a few delicate notes, testing the space, as if to announce my arrival. The foyer was simple, yet inviting. A single candle burned on a small table, steady and unwavering, lighting the space with gentle warmth. Portraits hung on the walls, their faces partially obscured by shadow, almost as if they were observing me with quiet interest. The floor beneath my feet was smooth and warm, and the room had a feeling of calm. It was not eerie or frightening, only gentle and expectant, as if it held its breath for me to begin exploring. 3 doors opened from the foyer, one to the left leading to the parlor, one to the right to the dining room, and a hallway stretching deeper into the house. The soft melody of the piano drifted from somewhere beyond, beckoning me to explore. I moved toward the parlor, my footsteps quiet, yet somehow noticed by the house. The candlelight followed, illuminating my path. The gate had sighed open, and now the house welcomed me further, guiding me gently into its interior. The foyer was quiet and welcoming. A single candle burned steadily on a small table, its flame soft and golden, casting long, gentle shadows on the walls. The room smelled faintly of wax, polished wood, and the lingering scent of rain that had followed me in. Portraits hung along the walls. Their faces were partially hidden in shadow, yet there was a sense of recognition in their eyes, as if the house remembered them. Some faces were old, lined with the passage of time. Others were young, full of quiet expectation. The eyes seemed to watch, not with suspicion, but with interest. The floorboards beneath my feet were warm and smooth, familiar in a way that felt comforting. Each step I took sounded soft but deliberate, echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged space. The piano in the distance played again, the notes tentative at first, then forming a simple melody that filled the foyer with gentle sound. I walked closer to the table, noticing a small guest book resting beside the candle. Its pages were yellowed and soft, worn by years of careful hands. I opened it to a random page and saw names written in handwriting both familiar and strange. Some names I recognized, some I did not, and one seemed almost like my own, though I had never written it. A faint breeze moved through the room, though the windows were closed. It carried the scent of roses, subtle and sweet, and I realized that the air itself seemed alive, carrying memory and presence with it. I examined the 3 doors that led out of the foyer. One to the left opened into the parlor, one to the right led to the dining room, and a hallway stretched straight ahead into the deeper parts of the house. The piano's soft melody drifted from beyond, guiding my curiosity forward. I moved toward the parlor, the candlelight stretching along the walls as if guiding my way. The air felt calm and alive, warm without heat, inviting without urgency. Every step I took sounded soft but deliberate, echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged space. The space felt alive but gentle. It did not press, it did not demand. It simply existed, quiet, patient, and aware of my presence. I felt a sense of safety here, a quiet reassurance that I was welcome to explore, that the house would allow me to see what it wished to show. And so, stepping fully into the foyer, I prepared to move deeper into the house, feeling the candlelight's steady glow beside me and the faint notes of the piano accompanying my path. The parlor was quiet, filled with the subtle warmth of the house. Furniture lay beneath white cloths, shapes hinted at but softened by the coverings. A sofa, a wingback chair, and a small side table could be made out, all arranged carefully as if waiting for someone to return. A fireplace dominated one wall, though no wood burned within it. The hearth glowed faintly, radiating gentle warmth. The air smelled faintly of wax, old wood, and the subtle trace of flowers that seemed to drift in from somewhere unseen. In the center of the room, a rocking chair moved slowly, back and forth, not with urgency, not with malice, but with a measured, comforting rhythm, like the slow sway of a parent soothing a child. I approached it cautiously, sensing the presence it left behind, the impression of someone recently seated, a warmth in the cushions that made the chair feel lived in. On the mantel above the fireplace rested a small locket beside a clock. The locket was delicate, and when opened, revealed a tiny painting of 2 figures under an umbrella, blurred by time but unmistakably close. The clock ticked softly, almost in sync with my own heartbeat, keeping careful measure of the passing seconds. The piano in the distance changed its tune slightly, drifting into a simple lullaby that filled the parlor with gentle, familiar sounds. It was not a tune I recognized consciously, yet it felt known, like a memory half remembered. The rocking chair slowed its motion for a moment, then resumed, as if acknowledging my presence without demanding attention. Every element in the room felt alive but subtle, aware of my presence and yet patient. I examined the walls, noticing the portraits framed above the fireplace. Faces that were partially hidden by shadow seemed to observe without judgment. Some looked directly at me, some seemed lost in thought, and some smiled faintly, as if pleased that I had arrived. A small side table held a delicate vase of flowers, fresh and perfectly arranged. The scent mingled with the faint floral notes already in the air, adding a softness that made the room feel alive yet gentle. I stood quietly for a long moment, letting the room settle around me. The rocking chair continued its steady rhythm, the fireplace glowed faintly, and the piano's lullaby drifted faintly from the distance. It felt like a space designed to be remembered, a place where time slowed and allowed quiet reflection. With the parlor explored, I turned my attention toward the next door, sensing that the house had more to reveal, and that the path ahead would continue to guide me deeper into its quiet mysteries. The dining room stretched long and quiet, its table covered with a faded green runner and set with place settings arranged in careful symmetry. Each plate, glass, and piece of cutlery appeared perfectly in place, as if waiting for guests who might arrive any moment, though no one ever did. At the head of the table, a high-backed chair stood slightly pulled out, as if someone had just risen to greet an unseen visitor. The air was calm, but carried a faint sense of anticipation, like a room holding its breath for a moment that might never come. The floor beneath my feet was smooth, worn by countless footsteps that seemed to echo softly with my own. The scent of polished wood mingled with a faint trace of old wine and fruit, a memory of celebrations long past, though no one was present to enjoy them. A grandfather clock in the corner of the room kept time in reverse. Its pendulum swung slowly, deliberately, as if drawing the seconds back, like a tide retreating from the shore. I watched the hands move backward, and it felt neither wrong nor unsettling, only as though time itself had chosen to pause here, to honor the room and its invisible guests. I traced a fingertip along the edge of the table, feeling the smooth grain of the wood beneath my hand. It carried a sense of memory, as though it remembered every hand that had touched it before mine. The room did not demand attention, but it offered quiet stories to anyone willing to notice. From somewhere beyond, the piano played again, softly, a few notes drifting into the dining room like the echo of laughter from another era. Plates tapped lightly, almost imperceptibly, as if affirming the presence of unseen diners who had long ago departed. I imagined the conversations that had once filled this space, the clinking of glasses, the quiet laughter, and the warmth of shared meals. The room seemed to hold those moments carefully, keeping them intact for anyone who might arrive to witness them. I stood at the head of the table, imagining the chair welcoming me, and offered a quiet bow of respect. This room did not demand intrusion, it asked only for acknowledgement, for understanding that it held a kind of gentle memory, a kindness that endured without words. Turning toward the hallway that stretched beyond the dining room, I felt a gentle pull forward. The house had shown me its parlor and foyer, and now it seemed ready to guide me deeper into its quiet corridors, revealing more of its secrets and its warmth. The dining room remained, perfect and patient, set for guests who would never arrive, yet filled with a quiet presence that made me feel both welcomed and understood. The hallway seemed longer than it should have been, stretching into shadows that softened the edges of reality. Doors lined each side, each marked with a subtle symbol carved into the wood: a lantern, a rose, a crescent moon, a raven. Each door seemed to hum with quiet purpose, as if waiting to reveal its story. I touched the door with the lantern carved upon it, feeling a warmth in the wood that invited exploration. Yet the crescent moon door at the far end of the hall drew me more strongly, as though urging me to discover what lay beyond. Inside, I found a library. Shelves rose higher than the eye could reach, stacked with books of all sizes. Some leaned patiently against one another, while others stood rigid and proud, their spines whispering forgotten tales. Ladders leaned against the shelves, ready for use, though I could not see the top. The books themselves seemed aware of my presence. When I pulled a modest volume from a shelf, it opened to a story from my own childhood: a morning on a pier, a paper boat, a wind that promised adventure but kept me safe. The handwriting on the pages was unfamiliar, yet it mirrored the thoughts I had nearly forgotten. I lingered, turning the pages carefully, aware of the quiet life in the library. Each book carried a memory, a fragment of a moment preserved with gentle care. Some were mine, some belonged to others, yet all existed harmoniously within the space. The latter shifted slightly under my gaze, leaning closer as if guiding me toward the next story. I chose to leave the book where I had found it, returning it to the shelf where it belonged. The library seemed to nod in approval, pleased that I respected its quiet order. A narrow hallway opened further along the library, hinting at rooms yet to explore. The piano's soft notes drifted from beyond, faint but unmistakable, guiding me deeper into the house. The symbols on the doors glowed subtly in the dim light, each marking a choice I could make. The air smelled faintly of old paper, polished wood, and the lingering sweetness of flowers, combining into a scent both comforting and mysterious. The floor beneath my feet remained warm, smooth, and familiar, leading me naturally onward. With each step, the hallway seemed to stretch further, yet I felt no impatience, no fear. Time moved differently here. The house had its own rhythm, one that encouraged curiosity and quiet observation. I continued down the hall, drawn toward the doors and the promise of new discoveries, ready to see what the house would reveal next. The library unfolded around me like a world suspended in quiet anticipation. Rows of books rose higher than I could see, their spines lined with gold, silver, and deep shades of worn leather. The shelves smelled faintly of cedar, paper, and the faint sweetness of forgotten memories. Some books seemed ordinary, yet others carried an energy, a faint hum that suggested they remembered more than words could describe. I ran my fingers along the edges, feeling the weight of stories long held, some of them familiar, others entirely unknown. I pulled a book at random, and it opened to reveal a scene from my own past. A summer afternoon I had nearly forgotten, sunlight bouncing off water, laughter carried on the breeze. The words were not exactly as I remembered, yet the feeling was the same, the warmth, the gentle comfort, the quiet joy of a moment held in time. As I wandered deeper into the library, more books seemed to beckon. Each one whispered a story that had slipped through the cracks of memory, fragments of dreams, forgotten places, and fleeting thoughts. Some were mine, others belonged to strangers, yet all coexisted here, preserved by the quiet care of the house. A ladder leaned against a particularly tall shelf, inviting me to climb. I stepped carefully, feeling the wood firm beneath my feet. From above, the view was breathtaking. Endless rows of books stretching into shadows and light, stories stacked upon stories, a tapestry of human experience. One book, bound in deep green, felt especially warm in my hands. Opening it, I saw a scene I had never lived, yet felt intimately familiar. A garden at twilight, lanterns glowing softly among the flowers, and a figure moving silently through the paths, unseen but present. The library seemed to pulse gently with quiet life, as though it existed not only to store stories, but to remember them, to offer them to those willing to see. Every whisper of turning pages, every soft creak of the ladder, felt like the house speaking in subtle ways. I lingered for a long time, exploring shelves, touching spines, letting memories wash over me. Time passed differently here. The outside world felt distant, unimportant. The house, in its quiet and patient way, allowed me to exist fully within its embrace. Finally, I left the library, carrying with me a sense of gentle understanding. The house had shared fragments of forgotten memories, and I felt both enriched and humbled by its quiet generosity. The hallway beyond waited, promising more to discover, more to remember, and more to experience in the gentle unfolding of the night. The staircase leading to the attic was narrow and steep, the wood worn smooth from countless steps that had passed before mine. Each tread felt alive, carrying echoes of those who had ascended before, whispers of footsteps and quiet laughter lingering in the grain. The attic door was small, its hinges slightly creaking as I pushed it open. A soft light spilled from the dormer window, casting the space in a gentle golden glow. Dust motes floated lazily in the light, drifting like tiny stars caught in a quiet universe. Inside, the attic was a cozy repository of forgotten things. Old trunks lined the walls, their leather cracked but supple, each one containing treasures waiting to be discovered. Shelves held stacks of carefully labeled boxes, small objects preserved as if time itself had paused to protect them. A rocking chair sat near the window, a small blanket draped over its back. Beside it, a pile of children's books was stacked neatly, their covers faded and corners softened by countless readings. The scent of paper, wax, and old wood mingled with a faint hint of lavender, soothing and familiar. The dormer window offered a view of the night beyond. The moon hung low and luminous, silver light spilling across the village below. Rain traced delicate patterns on the glass, each drop catching the light like a miniature prism, turning the darkness outside into a gentle, sparkling scene. I opened a small trunk and discovered toys, hand-carved and painted long ago. Each one seemed to carry a story, a memory of a child's laughter, of quiet afternoons and secret adventures. I held a tiny wooden horse in my hand, feeling the smooth curves and faint warmth in the wood, as if it had waited for this moment. The piano's soft melody drifted up from below, mingling with the rhythmic patter of rain against the roof. The attic felt suspended in time, a space where the past and present coexisted gently, each item a quiet reminder of lives once lived and moments cherished. I lingered by the window, watching the moonlight reflect off the wet rooftops, feeling a calm presence around me. The attic, with its quiet treasures and gentle atmosphere, was a sanctuary within the house, a place where the world outside faded and only the soft glow of memory remained. As I descended the stairs, leaving the attic behind, I carried with me the quiet warmth of the dormer, knowing the house had shared another piece of itself, another layer of its timeless, gentle presence. The soft melody that had drawn me upward now guided me to a room bathed in a dim, golden glow. A grand piano sat in the corner, its polished surface reflecting the flickering light from nearby candles. The keys seemed to move almost of their own accord, producing a delicate, gentle tune that filled the room with warmth. The music was soothing, yet carried a subtle wistfulness, like a memory half remembered. Each note lingered in the air, vibrating softly against the walls, the floor, and my very chest. I approached slowly, drawn to the instrument as if it were speaking directly to me. Sheets of music rested on the stand, handwritten and worn, the edges curled from years of use. The melody played softly, yet when I glanced at the notes, I realized they were not entirely human. They shifted slightly, forming patterns that seemed alive, guiding the music rather than following it. The room smelled faintly of polished wood, candle wax, and rain-soaked air from a nearby window. The piano's voice intertwined with the subtle sound of the rain outside, creating a harmony that seemed composed by the house itself. I placed my hand lightly on the keys, and the music responded, gentle vibrations that resonated in my fingers. It was as though the piano recognized my presence, welcoming me into its song without question. Each note was deliberate, slow, and comforting, forming a lullaby that seemed intended for anyone willing to listen closely. The room held a quiet stillness beyond the music, a calmness that encouraged reflection. I noticed a small chair beside the piano, and though no one sat there, it felt as if the space had been prepared for me, as though the house itself wished for me to remain in this melody for a while. Beyond the piano, the room opened slightly into a hallway, but I lingered, allowing the lullaby to wash over me. The melody was not hurried, not pressing, simply offering warmth and quiet companionship. It reminded me of nights long past, of comforting hands and gentle words, and of moments that linger even when forgotten. Finally, I stepped back from the piano, feeling a sense of calm settle in my chest. The music continued softly, filling the space behind me, guiding me as I moved toward the next part of the house. The hallway awaited, and the house had more to reveal, but the piano's lullaby lingered, a gentle companion in the quiet, mysterious night. The hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit by the soft glow of lanterns that seemed to float just above the floor. The faint sound of the piano's lullaby drifted from behind, mingling with the quiet hum of the house itself. Each step I took echoed lightly, though never sharply, as if the house adjusted to my presence. At the far end of the hallway, a figure stood holding a small lantern. It was difficult to see clearly, its shape softened by shadows and the gentle light, but there was a sense of familiarity, not in form, but in presence. The figure seemed to acknowledge me with a subtle nod, an invitation without words. I stepped closer, the soft patter of rain outside blending with the quiet hum of the house. The figure did not move, yet it radiated a quiet awareness, a calmness that was neither threatening nor urgent. The lantern it held cast a warm golden circle of light, illuminating the walls around it and revealing delicate carvings that had gone unnoticed before. The air carried a faint scent of roses, the same fragrance that had drifted through the foyer and attic. It was comforting, gentle, and almost familiar, like a memory brushing against the edge of thought. The figure did not speak, yet I felt a message carried through the presence itself, a welcome, a gentle assurance, a shared understanding that I was meant to be here. I noticed the subtle movements of the lantern's flame, flickering with each breath of air in the hallway. Shadows danced softly on the walls, creating patterns that seemed to mimic the rhythm of my own heartbeat. I felt a connection with the house, with the figure, and with the quiet life that seemed to pulse through the walls and floor beneath me. Slowly, I reached out my hand, not to touch, but to acknowledge the presence. The figure did not move closer, nor did it withdraw. It simply stood, lantern glowing steadily, as if confirming that I was welcome and that the house had been waiting for me to arrive. In that moment, I understood that the house was not merely a structure, but a living memory, a keeper of stories, and a gentle guide. The figure with the lantern was part of its essence, a guardian of its quiet mysteries, inviting me to continue exploring without fear, without rush, and with the trust that I was meant to discover its hidden wonders. The staircase leading upward was narrower than the main hall, its steps worn smooth by countless feet over countless years. The walls on either side were lined with faded wallpaper, patterns of delicate vines and flowers that seemed to ripple in the dim glow of the lanterns. Each step carried me higher, yet the house felt patient, holding time still as I ascended. At the top of the stairs, a long hallway stretched ahead, lined with closed doors. Some doors bore small brass plaques, etched with symbols I could not immediately recognize. Others were plain, yet each seemed alive, radiating a gentle presence, as if each room held a secret waiting to be discovered. The air was warmer here, carrying a soft scent of aged wood and faint traces of flowers from rooms unseen. A quiet creak accompanied each footstep, not loud enough to startle, but enough to remind me that I was moving through a space both lived in and preserved, a bridge between past and present. I approached the first door on the left, lightly tracing the paneling with my fingers. It felt familiar, though I could not recall ever having been here before. Behind it, I imagined stories, soft echoes of footsteps, whispers, and laughter that had passed through the hall long ago. The piano's gentle melody floated up from below, faint but unmistakable, as if guiding me along the hallway. Shadows shifted softly along the walls, elongating and shrinking with the subtle movement of the light, creating a rhythm that mirrored my own heartbeat. I reached the next door and pressed my hand to it. Warmth radiated through the wood, a welcome without sound. I realized that the house responded to presence here, acknowledging visitors with quiet gestures. Each door offered its own promise of discovery, yet I chose to move slowly, savoring the anticipation of what each room might hold. Halfway down the hall, a window allowed moonlight to spill in, casting silver patterns on the floor. The glass was slightly wet from rain, and the reflection of the moon shimmered like a distant lantern, giving depth to the hallway and illuminating the worn carpet that led me onward. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, yet it was not oppressive. Each step felt intentional, guided, as if the house itself was pacing with me, inviting me to explore without fear or hurry. The doors, the shadows, the soft light, and the faint music all combined to create a sense of gentle expectation. I continued down the upstairs hallway, drawn forward by curiosity and a quiet sense of wonder, feeling that the rooms beyond each door held pieces of stories, memories, and secrets that the house had preserved patiently, waiting to share them with anyone willing to notice. The room opened wide, filled with the soft glow of moonlight pouring through tall, narrow windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. Each window framed a different view of the night outside. Rooftops slick with rain, distant trees swaying in the wind, and the silver reflection of the moon across the village streets below. The floor beneath my feet was smooth, polished wood, reflecting the light in soft, gentle patterns. The air carried a faint chill from the night outside, mingling with the warmth that lingered from the house itself. It was a balance of cool and comfort, a quiet reminder of the world beyond the walls and the sanctuary within. I moved from window to window, observing each frame as if stepping through tiny portals. One revealed the silhouette of a distant church tower, its bell dormant for now. Another showed a garden hidden in shadow, the outlines of plants and flowers shifting softly in the night breeze. Each view felt like a story, a fragment of a world I could only glimpse through glass and moonlight. Along the window sills were small objects, curious and delicate, tiny figurines, a half-faded photograph, a glass vial with something shimmering inside. Each seemed carefully placed, as though meant to be discovered, touched, and remembered. A soft wind slipped through a slightly open pane, carrying the scent of wet earth and flowers. The room felt alive, not just with the moonlight, but with the subtle presence of things remembered, stories held, and memories waiting to be touched. I paused at the largest window, gazing at the village below. The rooftops glistened in the moonlight, quiet and still. The house itself seemed suspended in time, existing between the world outside and the quiet mysteries within. From somewhere beyond, the faint piano melody drifted upward, mingling with the soft patter of rain against the glass. The sound seemed to encourage reflection, urging me to pause and consider the beauty of both the world outside and the space I occupied. I noticed a small chair tucked into a corner, positioned perfectly for someone to sit and watch the night unfold. I imagined the quiet presence of previous visitors, or perhaps the house itself, taking a moment to breathe in the serenity of the scene. The room of windows held a sense of stillness that was comforting, almost sacred. Each frame, each shadow, each faint sound of wind and rain contributed to an atmosphere that encouraged quiet observation and reflection. As I turned to leave, I felt the gentle pull of the hallway beyond, guiding me onward. The house had shared a glimpse of its view, a quiet connection to the outside world, and now it was ready to reveal more of its hidden interior, deeper rooms filled with soft mysteries and gentle stories. The next door opened into a room unlike any other I had seen in the house. The ceiling arched high above, and sunlight, or what seemed like sunlight, though the moon was outside, filtered softly through a glass dome, illuminating a lush garden that thrived indoors. Plants of all shapes and sizes filled the space, their leaves glistening with dew, and flowers of every color swayed gently, as if stirred by an unseen breeze. A narrow stone path wound through the greenery, leading past small fountains and shallow pools of water where the light danced on the surface. The air smelled of earth, blossoms, and a faint trace of rain, mingling in a scent that was both invigorating and soothing. Birdsong, faint but real, filled the space. Tiny birds flitted from branch to branch, landing momentarily before taking flight again. Butterflies moved slowly among the flowers, delicate wings catching the soft light. The room felt alive, vibrant, and yet perfectly peaceful, as if it existed in its own timeless rhythm. Along the path, small benches were tucked between flowering shrubs, inviting quiet reflection or simply the enjoyment of the gentle beauty. I traced my fingers over a vine, feeling the smooth texture of its leaves and the cool moisture that clung to them. Every plant seemed intentional, carefully placed, and yet free to flourish in its own way. A faint trickle of water led me to a small fountain at the center of the garden. The sound was soft and constant, mingling with the faint hum of the house and the distant piano from earlier rooms. I knelt to touch the water, feeling the coolness slip over my fingertips, a tangible connection to the serenity surrounding me. I noticed lanterns hanging from the ceiling, their gentle light blending with the moonlight above, casting shadows that danced lightly across the foliage. The effect was magical, a quiet interplay of illumination and shade, life and stillness. The secret garden felt like a sanctuary, a place where the house allowed the outside world to enter without disturbing its inner calm. Here the air, the plants, the light, and the soft sounds created a living space of tranquility, reminding me that not all mysteries needed to be dark or hidden. Some were simply gentle and nurturing. I lingered along the path, following its curves, observing the smallest details of leaves, petals, and water ripples, feeling a quiet connection to the life held within the house. Eventually, I moved toward a small door at the far end, the garden gently guiding me onward to the next part of the house, promising more discoveries and quiet wonders beyond. The door at the far end of the secret garden opened to reveal a spiral staircase winding upward in a slow, graceful curve. The steps were carved from dark wood, polished smooth by countless hands that had traced the railing over the years. Each turn of the staircase seemed to carry me higher, deeper into the house, yet without ever feeling hurried or oppressive. The walls around the staircase were lined with narrow windows, letting in shafts of moonlight that traced pale lines along the curved steps. The light illuminated faint patterns in the wood, intricate swirls that seemed almost alive, like a secret language etched into the house itself. The air was warmer here, with a hint of the garden below lingering behind, mingling with the faint scent of old wood and candle wax. Each step made a soft creak, a gentle acknowledgment from the house of my passage. The staircase felt patient, a gentle guide leading me upward toward rooms unseen. As I ascended, I noticed small alcoves carved into the wall. Each held a candle, flickering softly as if lit by an invisible hand. Shadows danced along the spiral, creating a rhythmic play of light and dark that mirrored the slow, deliberate motion of the steps. Partway up, I paused and looked down. The spiral descended endlessly into shadow, yet the path below was clear, safe, inviting. The staircase seemed to hold the past, present, and future within its curve, a bridge connecting every part of the house with quiet grace. Halfway to the top, a soft breeze brushed my cheek, carrying the scent of rain and distant flowers. It reminded me of the garden below, the attic above, and the piano's lullaby that still lingered faintly from earlier rooms. The house seemed aware of every movement, every breath, every thought, offering subtle encouragement to continue. At the top of the spiral, a small landing opened into another hallway. The light here was soft and inviting, guiding me forward without words. The railing curved gently, polished and warm beneath my hands, supporting each step as I prepared to leave the staircase behind. The spiral staircase had carried me upward, not just through the house, but through a sense of calm, reflection, and anticipation. I stepped onto the landing, feeling the quiet life of the house continue around me, ready to reveal the next room, the next story, and the next gentle mystery waiting to unfold. At the end of the landing, a narrow door appeared, almost hidden behind a dark velvet curtain. Its surface was plain, yet the subtle hum and energy seemed to emanate from within, like a heartbeat waiting to be heard. I reached for the handle, and it turned easily, revealing a room bathed in soft golden light. Inside, the hidden music room revealed itself in quiet splendor. Instruments of all kinds filled the space: harps, violins, flutes, and more, all arranged neatly as if anticipating someone's touch. Each one glimmered with a gentle glow, polished and well cared for, though I could feel a history vibrating from their strings and keys. A grand piano stood in the center of the room, larger than the one downstairs, its keys gleaming faintly. Sheets of music rested on its stand, delicate notes forming patterns that seemed alive, ready to play without hands. The faintest hint of melody drifted through the air, a song half remembered, yet comforting, weaving through the room like a gentle whisper. I walked among the instruments, lightly touching a violin. It vibrated softly at my touch, resonating with the energy of the house. Each instrument seemed aware of my presence, acknowledging me with gentle warmth, as if inviting me to explore the music of memories held within the room. Along the walls, shelves displayed smaller objects: metronomes frozen at different times, music boxes, and delicate tuning forks. Some of these items hummed quietly, adding layers to the unseen symphony that filled the room. The air smelled faintly of polished wood, brass, and a soft hint of rosewater. A large window at the far end allowed moonlight to pour in, illuminating the instruments and casting shadows that moved with the invisible rhythm of the music. I felt drawn toward the piano, placing my fingers lightly on the keys. The notes responded, soft and deliberate, weaving seamlessly into the distant lullaby from the house below. The room felt alive but calm, like a sanctuary where music and memory intertwined. It was as if every note, every string, and every vibration carried a story, patiently waiting for someone to notice. I lingered, letting the music envelop me, each sound a gentle reminder of the house's quiet care. Eventually, I stepped back, leaving the piano and instruments in their serene arrangement, feeling that the hidden music room had shared a secret piece of the house's soul, one that would linger with me long after I moved forward. The door at the end of the hallway opened to a room unlike any I had seen before. Mirrors lined every wall, each framed in dark, polished wood, with delicate carvings curling like vines. The reflections multiplied infinitely, creating the impression that the room stretched far beyond its physical walls. I stepped inside cautiously, noticing the soft glow of lanterns suspended from the ceiling. Their light bounced off the mirrors, scattering in countless directions, making the space feel alive, fluid, and slightly surreal. Every reflection showed not just my image, but subtle variations, shadows that moved independently, fleeting glimpses of someone I could not quite recognize. The air smelled faintly of old glass, wax, and a subtle floral note, delicate and soothing. I moved slowly, testing the floor beneath me, noting that my reflection always followed, yet sometimes seemed to anticipate my movement, arriving a heartbeat before I did. A small table rested in the center of the room, holding a single candle and a tiny polished hand mirror. When I picked up the hand mirror, my reflection appeared crisp and familiar, yet I could see the faintest outlines of rooms and corridors behind me that were not physically present. The piano's lullaby drifted up from below, mingling with the soft echoes in the mirrored room. Each sound seemed to multiply, creating layers of resonance that bounced endlessly from surface to surface, producing a gentle symphony of reflection and memory. I approached one mirror closely, and for a moment my reflection smiled independently, a knowing, quiet gesture. It felt as if the room remembered, as if the mirrors were repositories of moments that had passed through the house. Memories of visitors, of music, of whispered conversations and fleeting glances. Shadows shifted along the edges of the mirrors, creating depth where none should exist. The room felt alive, not threateningly so, but as a space where presence and memory could coexist, where reflections held more than simple images. They held stories. I lingered, letting my gaze wander from mirror to mirror, noticing the subtle differences in each reflection. The room was a quiet reminder that the house existed on multiple levels, not just in space, but in memory, time, and perception. Finally, I set the hand mirror back on the table and stepped toward the hallway beyond. The mirrors reflected my departure, yet I sensed that the room's quiet presence would linger, holding its story safely until the next visitor arrived. The study was small and intimate, the walls lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes and worn manuscripts. The scent of old paper and polished wood greeted me immediately, mingling with the faint aroma of candle wax. The room seemed quiet, yet alive with the faint hum of knowledge preserved over decades. A desk sat near the center of the room, bathed in the soft glow of a single flickering candle. Its flame cast long, dancing shadows across the surface, illuminating scattered papers, an inkwell, and a quill that seemed ready to write on its own. The desk seemed to invite attention, yet demanded patience, a quiet reverence for the work it had seen. I approached the desk and noticed the papers carefully arranged, some filled with neat handwriting, others with sketches of rooms, gardens, and corridors of the house. Each page seemed infused with a delicate presence, capturing thoughts and observations of someone who had once lived here. A chair pulled slightly back from the desk, as if someone had recently left. I imagined sitting there, pen in hand, letting the candlelight guide my thoughts. The flickering flame mirrored the rhythm of my heartbeat, lending a gentle intimacy to the room. The piano's soft melody drifted up faintly from the lower rooms, mingling with the quiet crackle of the candle and the gentle sigh of the house. I ran my fingers over the inkwell, feeling the cool glass beneath my touch, and sensed the weight of countless words that had been written, read, and preserved here. Bookshelves loomed close on all sides, yet the space never felt crowded. Instead, it felt protective, like a cocoon holding knowledge, stories, and the soft presence of those who had inhabited the study long ago. I pulled a book at random, finding notes in the margins, sketches of small details of the house, and faintly drawn symbols that I did not recognize, but somehow understood. A soft breeze stirred the pages, though the window was slightly ajar. The air carried the scent of rain and distant flowers, a gentle reminder of the garden and the world beyond the study. The room seemed to exist in a balance between stillness and life, quiet yet full of subtle movement. I lingered at the desk, feeling the intimacy of the study wrap around me. It was a place for reflection, for thought, for quiet connection with the house itself. Eventually, I stepped back, letting the room settle behind me, knowing that its gentle presence would remain, a quiet companion as I continued exploring deeper into the house. The next door opened to a room filled with clocks of every kind. Grandfather clocks stood tall along the walls, their pendulums swinging in steady rhythm. On shelves and tables, smaller clocks ticked quietly, brass, silver, wooden, each with its own personality and gentle presence. The air was filled with a soft chorus of ticking, each clock slightly out of sync, yet harmonizing in a subtle symphony. The sound was not overwhelming. It was soothing, like the heartbeat of the house itself, marking time in a way that felt patient and deliberate. Some clocks moved forward as expected, others seemed to move backward, and a few appeared frozen, capturing a single, perfect moment. I approached one particularly ornate timepiece, its hands spinning slowly, almost as if reluctant to leave the present second behind. The room smelled faintly of old wood, polished brass, and the lingering sweetness of wax. Shadows flickered as the pendulum swung, stretching across the walls in intricate patterns that seemed alive, like dancing ribbons of time. A small table near the center of the room held an hourglass, sand flowing endlessly, tiny grains catching the light as they tumbled in silence. I watched, entranced, noticing that the passage of time here was different, slower, gentler, more deliberate, as though the house itself had decided to measure moments carefully. I ran my hand along the face of a clock, feeling its warmth and weight, sensing the countless hours it had witnessed, the quiet stories it had observed. Each clock in the room seemed to hold a fragment of history, some joyful, some solemn, all preserved with quiet reverence. Through the window, moonlight filtered softly, illuminating the room and the delicate movements of the clocks. I noticed the reflections in the glass, shadows that stretched and shifted, marking time in ways beyond ordinary perception. I lingered, letting the rhythm of the ticking guide my thoughts. The room felt like a sanctuary where time could be observed, contemplated, and understood, not rushed, not pressured, simply present. Finally, I turned toward the door leading onward. The house had shared another of its mysteries, a space where time was fluid and gentle, and where every tick, swing, and turn carried the quiet weight of memory and presence. The hallway beyond the room of clocks opened wide, its walls lined with tall portraits in heavy gilded frames. Each painting depicted a figure, some seated, some standing, some caught in the middle of an ordinary gesture. Their eyes followed gently, not with malice, but with a presence that felt both watchful and kind. The soft glow of lanterns illuminated their faces, casting subtle shadows that shifted as I moved. Some portraits were detailed and lifelike, capturing the smallest folds in clothing or strands of hair. Others were more abstract, brushstrokes flowing in patterns that suggested emotion rather than form. The hallway smelled faintly of oil paint and varnish, mingled with the ever-present scent of wood and candlelight. The silence here was thicker, softer, as if the portraits themselves hushed the air, holding their stories within painted frames. I paused before one, a woman in a dark dress, her hands folded gently in her lap. Her gaze was calm, her expression soft, and for a moment I felt as if she might speak. Instead, her presence radiated silently, a warmth that encouraged me to continue. Further down, a portrait of a child caught my eye. The child held a small lantern, its painted glow so realistic it seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim hallway. I imagined the artist capturing not just an image, but a moment of light, preserved forever within the paint. Some portraits bore dates, names, or delicate symbols etched into the frame. Others remained anonymous, leaving only the silent conversation between viewer and subject. Each portrait seemed to acknowledge my presence, not intrusively, but as though greeting a familiar traveler returning after a long absence. The piano's distant lullaby floated faintly through the hall, blending with the quiet presence of the figures. Their painted eyes reflected the soft flicker of lantern light, and the longer I lingered, the more it felt as if they shifted subtly, not to alarm, but to remind me they were part of the house, guardians of memory and time. At the far end, a tall double door waited, framed by the largest portraits yet, two figures standing side by side, one holding a book, the other holding a key. They seemed to guard the passage forward, yet their faces were calm, almost encouraging. I breathed deeply, feeling the presence of all the silent watchers around me. The Hall of Portraits was not a place of fear, but of remembrance, a gallery of lives and stories captured in stillness, waiting quietly in the soft glow of lantern light. The double doors opened with a soft sigh, revealing a vast ballroom bathed in the glow of countless candles. Tall chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their crystals catching the light and scattering it in delicate patterns across the polished wooden floor. The room felt grand yet gentle, filled with quiet grace rather than noise or festivity. The walls were draped with velvet curtains in deep shades of burgundy and gold. Large mirrors reflected the candlelight endlessly, making the ballroom seem even larger, a space that stretched into infinity. The air carried a faint fragrance of wax, polished wood, and something sweet, like old roses lingering from dances long past. Though the room was empty, it did not feel abandoned. The faintest echo of music lingered in the air, not loud enough to define, but present enough to stir the imagination. I could almost hear the sweep of violins, the rise and fall of a waltz, and the whisper of feet gliding across the floor. I stepped forward, and the floor beneath me gleamed, as if freshly polished. My footsteps echoed softly, blending with the faint ghost of imagined music. For a moment, I felt as though I were part of a dance, moving gracefully with unseen partners, carried by the rhythm of memory. Along the edges of the room stood elegant chairs and small tables, each carefully arranged, waiting for guests who would never arrive. Their presence gave the room a sense of readiness, as if a gathering might begin at any moment, though centuries had already passed since the last celebration. Above me, the chandeliers flickered gently, their countless flames swaying in perfect harmony with the unseen melody. Shadows danced along the curtains and mirrors, shifting like silent figures moving across the floor. I paused at the center of the ballroom, closing my eyes. The music grew clearer in my mind, violins swelling, a piano rising softly beneath them, and the faint rustle of silk and lace. Though the room remained empty, I could feel its heartbeat, the rhythm of countless evenings spent in light, laughter, and motion. When I opened my eyes, the room seemed to bow around me, its presence acknowledging my visit. It was a grand space, yet not intimidating. Instead, it was filled with warmth, memory, and the subtle comfort of knowing that beauty, once created, lingers forever. I turned toward the far side of the ballroom, where another set of doors waited in quiet patience. The ballroom, with all its light and music, seemed to offer a final graceful nod as I stepped onward into the deeper mysteries of the house. The next door opened into a long, narrow hall illuminated by lanterns of every shape and size. They hung from the ceiling, lined the walls, and rested on shelves, each one glowing with a different warmth: soft gold, pale blue, deep amber, and silvery white. The gallery shimmered like a river of light, guiding me forward with quiet elegance. Each lantern was unique. Some were simple, their glass panes plain and clear. Others were intricate, etched with swirling designs that scattered delicate shadows across the walls. A few held tiny flickers that pulsed gently, as though breathing in rhythm with the house itself. The air smelled faintly of oil and old paper, with just a trace of rain carried in from somewhere unseen. The warmth of the lanterns wrapped around me like a blanket, comforting and familiar, though I had never been here before. As I walked, I noticed that the lanterns shifted slightly, their flames swaying in time with my footsteps. The shadows stretched and folded, creating fleeting images, patterns that resembled faces, branches, flowing rivers, or distant landscapes. None lingered for long, but each felt like a glimpse into another memory hidden within the house. Halfway down the gallery, I found a small table with a lantern resting at its center. Its glass glowed brighter than the others, casting silver light that shimmered across the floor. Inside, instead of a flame, a tiny star seemed to shine, pulsing with calm energy. When I leaned closer, I thought I heard the faintest sound of wind moving through distant trees. The piano's soft melody reached me again, mingling with the warm glow of the lanterns. Each note seemed to echo off the glass, scattering into thousands of reflections, a quiet chorus of light and sound. I continued down the gallery, moving through the endless parade of lanterns. Their glow followed me, dimming behind and brightening ahead, as if they were guiding me with care. The space felt alive, not with urgency, but with gentle encouragement, a pathway carved from light itself. At the far end of the gallery, a tall arched door waited, framed by two lanterns larger than all the rest. Their glow was steady, unwavering, casting a golden halo that seemed to mark the threshold into another story, another mystery waiting to unfold. The arched door opened into a vast glass-walled conservatory. Moonlight spilled through the domed ceiling, illuminating rows of tall plants, ferns, and delicate flowers that glistened with drops of water. A soft rain tapped gently against the glass panes above, the sound blending seamlessly with the house's quiet heartbeat. The air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of wet leaves and blooming petals. The conservatory felt like an enclosed piece of the outside world, yet gentler, as if the house had captured the essence of rain and preserved it here for all time. A narrow stone path wound between the greenery, bordered by shallow pools of water, where silver ripples spread with every droplet that fell from the ceiling. Small lanterns stood at intervals along the path, their flames flickering softly, casting reflections on the wet stone. I paused beneath a tall palm, reaching out to catch a droplet of water as it slid from a leaf. The coolness lingered on my skin, a delicate reminder of how alive this place was. Every sound, the patter of rain, the faint rustle of leaves, the quiet hum of the lanterns, wove together into a lullaby of nature, soothing and eternal. Deeper into the conservatory, I discovered a small fountain where rainwater collected, spilling over smooth stones into a crystal-clear pool. The surface shimmered with the reflection of the moon, its glow broken only by the gentle ripples of falling drops. The sound was steady, calming, like a heartbeat carried in water. I sat on a bench tucked between flowering shrubs, listening to the rain above. The glass ceiling magnified the rhythm, turning each drop into a soft note, blending with the faint piano music drifting from elsewhere in the house. It was a harmony of elements, water, air, and sound, woven together in perfect balance. The conservatory seemed to exist beyond time. Though the rain continued endlessly, the plants remained fresh, the flowers always in bloom, the pools never overflowing. It was a sanctuary, a secret place where the storm outside became a gentle companion instead of something to fear. When I rose to leave, I looked once more at the ceiling. Raindrops streaked the glass, catching the moonlight and scattering it in fleeting patterns. The conservatory of rain felt like a dream preserved in glass and stone, a gift of calm the house offered to anyone willing to listen. The next room unfolded into a vast library, larger than any I had ever seen. Shelves stretched high into the shadows above, so tall they seemed to vanish into the ceiling. Each was filled with books of every size and color, their spines worn, their pages whispering with the weight of countless stories. The scent of parchment, ink, and polished wood filled the air, rich and comforting. The quiet hum of the house blended with the faint rustle of unseen pages turning somewhere deep within the shelves. It was not silence that filled the library, but a presence, the living memory of words preserved carefully in this endless sea of knowledge. Tall ladders leaned against the shelves, ready to carry any reader to the highest volumes. Lanterns hung at intervals, casting warm circles of light that illuminated small sections of the library while leaving others in shadow. The effect made the space feel infinite, as if it stretched far beyond what the eye could see. I pulled a book from a lower shelf, its leather cover soft with age. Inside, the words were written in a flowing hand, the ink faded but still legible. Some pages held illustrations, landscapes, faces, and symbols that echoed patterns I had seen elsewhere in the house. It felt less like reading and more like discovering fragments of the house's soul. Deeper inside, I found small tables scattered between the shelves, each holding stacks of open books, quills, and half-burnt candles. It was as if readers had only just stepped away, leaving their work suspended in time, waiting patiently for their return. The piano's melody drifted faintly here, softened by the thick shelves, blending with the almost inaudible sound of pages turning in the distance. The rhythm was steady, unhurried, like breathing. At one point, I noticed a staircase spiraling upward into more shelves, disappearing into shadow. The library did not end, it simply continued, an endless labyrinth of stories, knowledge, and memory. Every corner promised new discoveries, yet there was no urgency, only the quiet comfort of knowing the stories would always be here, waiting. I lingered, running my fingers along the spines as I passed. Each book seemed to pulse faintly, as though alive, eager to share its tale. The library was not simply a place of learning, but a sanctuary of voices, countless souls speaking softly through the written word, preserved in infinite rows of shelves. Eventually, I moved toward a tall archway lit by a golden lantern, the promise of the next mystery drawing me onward. Still, I carried the weight of the library with me, its presence like a warm hand resting gently on my shoulder. A winding staircase led upward, its stone steps cool beneath my feet, until at last I emerged into a circular chamber crowned by a vast glass dome. This was the observatory, perched high above the rest of the house, where the night sky stretched endlessly in all directions. The dome revealed a tapestry of stars, sharp and brilliant against the velvet dark. Constellations shimmered faintly, as if painted across the heavens with a hand both ancient and patient. The moon hung low, casting silver light that spilled across the polished wooden floor, reflecting faintly against the brass fittings of the instruments that filled the room. A massive telescope stood in the center, its body of brass and glass gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Its lens was turned upward, as though watching the sky with a single unblinking eye. Around it, smaller devices rested on tables, charts of the stars, astrolabes, and pages marked with precise looping handwriting. The observatory carried a quiet hum, not mechanical, but something deeper, the sound of the universe itself, resonating faintly within the dome. Each breath felt like it was in rhythm with the stars, each heartbeat like a note in a celestial song. I approached the telescope, peering through its lens. The night sky leapt into focus, impossibly close. I saw the surface of the moon with its pale craters, and beyond, clusters of stars so dense they seemed like rivers of light. Some flickered faintly, as though winking knowingly. Others shone steadily, eternal and unyielding. In the silence, I could almost hear the stars whispering, as if they carried the voices of countless travelers who had gazed upon them before me. The melody of the piano drifted faintly upward through the stone walls, merging with the silence of the cosmos. It was a harmony of earth and sky, grounding and infinite all at once. Around the edges of the chamber, shelves held instruments that had long since ceased to be used, their brass dulled with time. Yet they felt preserved, waiting. The observatory was not abandoned. It was timeless, suspended between the heavens and the earth, its purpose still alive in the act of watching. I lingered, standing beneath the dome, letting the starlight wash over me. The sky seemed endless, yet comforting, as though I was part of something vast but welcoming. The house had given me the gift of the stars, a place to look outward and upward into infinity without fear. When I finally turned to leave, I felt the dome's gaze follow me. The stars would always remain, steady and patient, waiting for the next pair of eyes to rise and wonder. The corridor opened into a long gallery, its walls lined with towering portraits framed in gilded wood. Candlelight flickered from sconces along the walls, their glow reflecting off the glass that shielded each painting. The air was heavy with the scent of varnish and old canvas, mingled with the faint sweetness of dried flowers placed in vases beneath certain frames. Each portrait was strikingly lifelike. The figures within seemed to follow me with their eyes, their gazes steady but not unkind. Some faces were solemn, others gentle, a few carrying the faintest trace of a smile. They were not strangers, but felt like familiar presences, caretakers, storytellers, companions bound within painted silence. As I moved down the gallery, the faces shifted in age and character. There were children with wide, curious eyes, elders with lines etched deeply into their skin, and middle-aged figures poised with quiet confidence. Their clothing belonged to different times, as though each portrait preserved not only a face, but a fragment of history. The candle flames swayed gently, as if stirred by an unseen breath. Their light made the eyes of the portraits glimmer faintly, as though alive. I lingered before one, a woman with dark hair braided over her shoulder, her expression serene yet watchful. The brush strokes were so precise that her gaze seemed almost to meet mine. Further down, I came upon a series of smaller portraits grouped together. These were less formal, softer, showing people at rest, reading, writing, or gazing out of painted windows. They radiated warmth, capturing moments of quiet life. Standing before them, I felt as though I was intruding upon memories preserved with infinite care. The floor beneath me creaked softly as I walked, each step echoing into the stillness. The piano's melody reached even here, distant and muffled, blending with the hushed atmosphere of the gallery. It sounded less like music now, and more like an extension of the house's own heartbeat. At the far end of the gallery, a single portrait hung larger than the rest. It showed a group gathered together, figures I recognized from earlier portraits. Their expressions were gentle, unified, as if to say, "You are not alone here." The candlelight pooled around this final painting, illuminating it with a golden glow. I paused in the silence, feeling the quiet presence of all those who had been captured, watching, waiting, welcoming. The gallery was not a place of ghosts, but of memory, where stories lingered, carried by painted faces that would never fade. When I stepped beyond the last frame, I felt their gazes soften, releasing me into the next passage, yet the comfort of their presence followed me, like unseen companions walking just behind. The door creaked open to reveal a vast circular chamber, its walls lined entirely with tall, ornate mirrors. Each frame was different, some carved from dark wood, others cast in silver or gold, a few decorated with intricate patterns of ivy and roses. Their surfaces shimmered faintly in the lantern light, reflecting not only the room, but bending it, twisting it into endless overlapping reflections. As I stepped inside, the floor beneath me gleamed like polished stone, catching fragments of the mirror's glow. The air was cool, carrying a faint metallic scent, as though the room itself had been forged from silver. Every movement I made rippled through the reflections, 1,000 versions of myself shifting silently in perfect unison. At first, the mirrors only showed what was present, the chamber, the lanterns, my solitary figure. But as I lingered, I began to notice subtle differences. In one mirror, a candle flame seemed taller than in the others. In another, my reflection tilted its head a fraction later than I had. None of it was frightening, only strange, like watching dreams overlap with waking. I moved slowly along the wall, pausing before each mirror. Some were clouded slightly with age, their glass rippling faintly as though hiding something behind a veil. Others were sharp and clear, reflecting with perfect precision. Yet in each there was a quiet presence, as though the mirrors themselves were watching as much as reflecting. The piano's distant notes reached me here, their sound refracting like light, scattering across the chamber. Each note seemed to echo differently in each reflection, creating layers of sound that folded into one another. It was music stretched into infinity, filling the chamber with a hushed, dreamlike resonance. In the center of the room stood a tall, oval mirror on a stand, framed in black wood. Its surface was darker than the others, reflecting more deeply, as though it contained not glass but water. When I gazed into it, the reflection seemed to ripple faintly, almost inviting me closer. Yet there was no menace in it, only a quiet stillness that drew me inward, like the surface of a calm lake at night. I lingered for a long while, watching my many reflections shift gently with me. Some seemed softer, others sharper, each one a different angle of the same truth. It felt less like being surrounded and more like being accompanied by all the versions of myself that had ever existed, each one silent, patient, and unafraid. When I finally turned toward the door, the reflections moved with me, falling back into perfect harmony. The mirrors glowed faintly as I stepped away, holding their secrets, waiting quietly for the next visitor. Through a narrow archway, draped with ivy, I stepped into a hidden garden, enclosed on all sides by tall stone walls. The sky above was open, revealing a stretch of stars that glimmered softly against the darkness. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying the scent of jasmine, roses, and damp earth. The garden was alive with quiet beauty. Moonlight bathed the leaves in silver, turning every blade of grass and every flower petal into something luminous. A stone path wound its way through clusters of blooming plants, leading toward the center, where a small fountain trickled gently, its waters catching the light in shimmering ripples. I walked slowly, letting the garden's stillness wrap around me. The sound of the fountain blended with the faint chirping of night insects, creating a melody that was both soothing and eternal. Every corner of the garden seemed to hold its own secret: a climbing rose heavy with blossoms, a cluster of lilies glowing faintly in the dark, a tree whose branches reached upward as if touching the stars. The walls were covered with ivy, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. At intervals, small lanterns were placed among the flowers, their flames steady and warm, as though someone had tended them not long ago. The light mingled with the moon's glow, casting gentle shadows that danced across the ground. I paused before the fountain, watching the water spill over smooth stone into a shallow pool. The surface mirrored the stars above so perfectly that it seemed as though the sky had descended into the garden itself. It was as if earth and heaven touched here, united in quiet reflection. The piano's melody reached faintly into this place, softened and distant, like a memory carried on the wind. It mingled with the sound of flowing water, creating a harmony that felt timeless. The garden was not grand, but it did not need to be. Its beauty lay in its intimacy, in the way it seemed to exist only for those who found it. It was a sanctuary, hidden and protected, a place to breathe deeply and feel the stillness of the night. I lingered, resting on a stone bench beneath a flowering tree. The petals above stirred in the breeze, drifting down softly around me, as if the garden itself was offering me its blessing. When at last I rose, I looked back once more. The hidden garden glowed faintly under the stars, eternal and waiting, a secret gift preserved in silence. A heavy wooden door opened to a room filled with clocks of every shape and size. Grandfather clocks lined the walls, their pendulums swinging in quiet rhythm, while smaller mantel clocks and pocket watches were arranged on tables and shelves. The room was alive with the soft, steady chorus of ticking, each clock keeping time in gentle harmony. The air smelled faintly of polished wood, brass, and the subtle sweetness of old candle wax. Shadows stretched and flickered as the pendulum swung, dancing along the walls and floor in hypnotic patterns. The ticking was both calming and mesmerizing, like a heartbeat echoing through the house itself. Some clocks moved faster than others, their hands spinning in curious, unpredictable motion. A few seemed frozen, their faces caught in a single, perfect second. I approached a tall grandfather clock, noticing the intricate carvings along its frame, vines, flowers, and tiny hidden creatures that seemed to peer at me with quiet curiosity. On a small table in the center of the room rested an hourglass, its sand falling slowly and evenly. I watched it for a long moment, mesmerized by the passage of countless grains. Each grain felt like a memory, fleeting yet eternal, captured in the simple flow of time. The piano's faint melody drifted into the room, blending with the ticking to create a rhythm that felt both natural and otherworldly. Time here was not rigid. It flowed like water, steady and patient, inviting me to move with it, not against it. I ran my fingers along the face of a small brass clock, feeling its warmth and subtle vibrations. Each clock seemed alive, holding stories within its mechanisms, each tick a whisper from the past. I could almost hear faint echoes of footsteps, laughter, and conversations that had once passed through this space. The room was both comforting and mysterious, a place where time could be observed, measured, and contemplated without hurry or interruption. Every sound, every shadow, every gentle swing of a pendulum contributed to the quiet symphony of presence. When I finally turned toward the door, the clocks continued their steady rhythm, not interrupted by my departure. The room remained alive with the gentle heartbeat of time, patient and eternal, ready to greet the next visitor with the same calm presence. A narrow door led me into another conservatory, but this one was different, silent, still, and almost reverent. The glass walls arched high above, revealing a night sky full of stars, their light casting delicate patterns on the polished stone floor. No rain fell here, and no breeze stirred the plants. The silence was profound, complete, yet comforting, as if the room existed outside the usual rules of sound and time. Tall plants lined the walls, their leaves dark and glossy in the moonlight. Flowers bloomed in muted shades, their petals heavy with dew that caught the faint light and reflected it like tiny prisms. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying subtle notes of earth, moss, and blossoms. Along the central path, stone benches invited quiet reflection. I sat for a moment, listening, not to music, for the room held none, but to the deep stillness that seemed to pulse softly around me. The absence of sound made every detail sharper: the texture of leaves, the curve of a vine, the faint shimmer of light on water collected in shallow basins. In the center of the conservatory stood a small fountain, motionless. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the stars above in crystal clarity. It was a mirror of the heavens, serene and complete, untouched by wind, time, or human disturbance. I walked slowly along the path, noting the intricate patterns of the plants and flowers. Each seemed to have been placed with intention, yet allowed to grow freely, a balance of order and natural beauty. The space felt like a sanctuary, a place where the house offered pure contemplation, unbroken by noise or interruption. The silence was not empty. It carried a subtle rhythm, the slow pulse of the house itself, steady and unyielding. In this silence, I felt connected to everything around me: the hidden garden, the observatory, the library, and all the other spaces I had explored. Each room had its own story, but here they converged into a single, tranquil presence. I lingered until my eyes adjusted fully to the dim moonlight. The silent conservatory seemed to hold its breath, waiting for me to notice every detail, to take in its quiet majesty. When I finally rose to leave, the silence remained, a gentle companion accompanying me toward the final part of the house. The last door opened into a grand hall, wider and taller than any room I had seen. The ceiling arched high above, adorned with delicate frescoes that depicted scenes of night skies, gardens, and quiet landscapes. The walls were lined with candles in ornate sconces, their flames steady and warm, casting long, gentle shadows that seemed to stretch toward the center of the hall. The floor was polished marble, cool beneath my feet, reflecting the glow of the candlelight in soft, shimmering patterns. At the far end of the hall stood a large window through which moonlight poured, bathing the space in silver and gold. The effect was both calming and majestic, as though the house itself had prepared a final gift before my departure. I walked slowly through the hall, feeling the weight of all the rooms I had passed, the echoes of piano melodies, the flicker of lanterns, the whispers of mirrors, the presence of clocks, and the bloom of hidden gardens. Everything converged here, in this final space, where the house seemed to pause in quiet acknowledgement of my journey. Along the walls, subtle carvings depicted travelers, dreamers, and wanderers, all moving gently toward the same window, toward the night beyond. Their faces were serene, patient, and kind. I felt included in their silent procession, a part of the long chain of visitors who had experienced the house's quiet magic. I paused at the center of the hall, closing my eyes. The warmth of the candlelight mingled with the coolness of the marble floor. I felt the presence of the house envelop me, a subtle pulse, a gentle rhythm, a quiet breath that reminded me that this place existed to welcome, to calm, and to preserve beauty and memory. When I opened my eyes, I approached the window. Outside, the moon hung low, its silver light spilling across the grounds and illuminating the distant gardens. The world beyond seemed larger, more inviting. Yet the house had gifted me a part of itself to carry with me: the calm, the quiet, the gentle rhythm of rooms alive with memory. I turned toward the door I had first entered, knowing I would leave the hall, but not the sense of presence it had given me. The farewell hall did not demand attention, nor did it whisper goodbyes. It simply existed, steady and patient, a final embrace for anyone who had wandered through the house's quiet mysteries. As I stepped out, the candlelight flickered once more, a soft, golden acknowledgement. The house remained behind, serene, eternal, and waiting for the next curious visitor who would come to explore its gentle, endless stories.